All right, my friends. So yeah, what we've got going here is the idea of the cell made a little more manifest, like real. Obviously, remember I said cells have all sorts of shapes, and they're not just little round blobs. Okay, so this is, and if this were a neuron, here'd be the cell body, and there'd be little branchings that come way out over here, and there'd be a really long axon going way out, maybe the other end of the classroom, for example, or even more. So, we've got, if there's a neuron, these are really long cells, so it could plug in here at the spinal cord, and one cell that is infinitesimally small could reach all the way to your big toe.
What?
Holy freaking crap. Muscle cells can also become pretty long. So there's minuscule, like microscopic things that are also 3 feet long. So I want you to realize that that's like, think about this cell supplying nutrients all the way out to the far end. It's like, it's a pretty big deal that this is where, like, in the cell body of all the different cells, there will be some general structures, other than, like, red blood cells don't have some of these things, but almost every cell has a nucleus, that's the pink in there, with the endoplasmic reticulum and ribosomes, the rough endoplasmic reticulum. You see those little orange dots? So this is where the orange dots are the little machinery that cobbles proteins together, and proteins are things like anything from collagen to some of our neurotransmitters like dopamine, other stuff, all of these different things. And they get cobbled together in this lovely structure here. The resources are brought together, and these little ribosomes, which you see are also speckled throughout the cell on their own in different spots, because not all protein synthesis is right here. So we've got these little ribosomes making things, and then this is budding off. This is like a little soap bubble, or actually a fat bubble, with little teeny tiny proteins inside. And I've done a cross section here, cutting it open. It's a non-cut open one. It look more like that. Yeah, so that's like a little bubble, and inside that little soap bubble, it's a fat bubble actually, there would be whatever payload, whatever it's made. This guy is the nucleus, remember, is where all the blueprints for making the things are. And depending on what signals the nucleus is getting from either inside the cell or from the outside world, make more collagen because everything is shaking around and we need to have more structural integrity. Okay. Yeah. So we're pulling on that nucleus. There could be little protein lines tying into the membrane on the outside and tying to the next cell. And the cells could be pulling on each other or sending signals back and forth, or signals could be coming from other cells in. Or, sometimes there'll just be things sticking out, little protrusions, little proteins sticking out on the outside that are just a certain shape. And when a signal comes and bumps into them, it'll tell the cell what to do. It'll carry that message to the nucleus, and the nucleus just responds by creating the right type of proteins or things to respond. It's a little factory kind of.
So is that a neurotransmitter?
Could be a neurotransmitter.
Okay.
Could be almost anything that the cell has kind of in its memory as a thing to respond to.
Cool.
So could be even a damaged bit of another cell. If a cell is sensing damage, like I said, like hyaluronic acid that's broken up, or bits of broken cell, or bits of broken bacteria, that's a signal. Yes?
When you say in its memory to respond to,
Kind of, there's a whole set of interlocking signals that can create a response, a cascade. So saying memory is more like saying there are little sets of pre-programmed type. If you get pulled on, it triggered, if the cell gets pulled on, And that pressure triggers a chemical cascade that then tells the nucleus, like, to make more collagen. So it's these chemical cascades that create certain shapes and responses, just like almost chemical reaction wise. One thing leads to the next, leads to the next. So tell is it doesn't say it in a voice, it says it with interlocking shapes that cause a thing to happen. You guys ever done like Rube Goldberg experiments where you make a thing and you create this thing causes this thing causes this thing? Similar to that. So I'm using the term tell loosely, or memory loosely. But things happening often enough and causing certain stimulus will cause the cell to it'll create things that are stored more over time. This was advantageous, this was disadvantageous, don't do it again. But it's way too complex to go into here, but really good question. Okay, so nucleus stores all the blueprints, and then the blueprints, depending on all the inputs, chemical, physical, the output is, well, we need to make more, let's say, we're making construction, we need to make more bricks in order to build this structure, or whatever. This endoplasmic reticulum with the little ribosomes, so it's called rough because it has little bumpy ribosomes. These ribosomes churn out proteins, which then bud off in these little bubbles. They are called vesicles. You don't need to remember that, but it's nice to have a name for things. And they bud off and they float over. Typically, if they're going to go out of the cell, they need to get packaged appropriately, not just in intracellular little vesicles, but they need to get set up so that they can go bloop out of the cell. So they got to get packaged. And you guys remember what this guy is called? The Golgi apparatus. So this little guy puts things in the proper shapes and packaging so it can get shipped out of the cell. And so these little vesicles will either merge with the cell wall, because they're both fatty layers, something called a phospholipid bilayer. Phosphate is a particular, molecule, and lipid means fat, so it's fat, and it keeps the liquid inside of the cell from merging with the liquid outside the cell. So it's a fat bubble. So this guy merges, and he'll go bloop out, and either he'll just explode and let out stuff, or sometimes he'll carry things out still in this shape.
How do they get out of the fat?
This is also a fat bubble. So this fat bubble can merge with that fat bubble. Bloop, bloop, bloop. Yep. So what are these funky shapes? I've done a cross section. Mitochondria. That's a cross. Yeah, hot dog. So I've done a cross section, but let's just say they look like that without being cut open. Cheetos, the Cheeto powerhouse of the cell. Cheetos are a powerhouse, man. So we've got our mitochondria, and they are producing energy. And you noticed I've grouped them. Oh, they kind of moved around a little bit earlier. I've grouped them near areas where a lot of energy is going to be used because you're making things or doing things. And let's say the body, this cell has more need of packaging and sending things out. It can move these little mitochondria. You see this little network of various fibers going through the cell. Cytoskeleton. And there's actually a lot more than this, but then you wouldn't have been able to see, what's going on. So these are both structural to hold things together and transmit force. And there are little roads. Remember those little motor proteins? Yeah. Yeah, so motor protein can grab onto one of these and drag it. And it's where we need it. And then, of course, the mitochondria, they are actually little teeny tiny bacteria that live in our cells and can't live on their own anymore. So if we need a lot more of them, they can reproduce, and you can have more, depending upon how, if you're working out more, if you have, more needs, they will reproduce. Pretty cool.
Are they asexual reproducers then?
Let's get
Yeah,
it on.
there's,
They
yeah.
clone themselves.
They clone, basically, yeah.
I just heard that song, man.
They only carry the mother's side of the mitochondrial DNA. Okay, so there are actually more structures that are in a cell, but I'm not going to complicate things. We're not actually going to go into like how cells split themselves and all that. So meiosis, mitosis, all that. We're just going to keep it simple with these main things, but just know there actually are more what's called organelles or organs. L is kind of small, so little organs of the cell. These are the ones I kind of want you to remember. Know there's a heck of a lot more going on inside a cell than what I'm actually showing you here.